Frontline Chat with Harry Tanguy and Dave Wardell.
Right, I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. We've got a really good guest today. Colin Taylor. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him since he had the fame of being the Scilly sergeant. And just to give you a quick glimpse, this is the book that he did. Anyone who goes on the Scillies will have to, they take that away like a passport out of the place again. It's a must. And it's all about policing on the most the most remote part of Great Britain, really, isn't it? Apart from Lundy Island, but it's the most beautiful place, and it's really Mediterranean because of it hitting the sun hitting it, and first part of the year. And there's Tresco's, like phenomenally beautiful flowers that can't be grown anywhere else on the mainland, really. But anyway, thanks first of all for the music and voiceover by Paul Blundell via Alex Can. So really appreciate that. Just spicing it up a bit, having a little bit of fun. Dave, where's Dave? Wow, Dave, let me just see, because I gave him a thing, and I said, Dave, yeah, see, he's not feeling very well at the moment, is Dave. I think he's been doing it, he's overdoing it in too many cold, damp fields. He needs to get an interest that is indoors and warm, like eating food or something, I think. He needs to do something like that. But he trains dogs. He trains dog owners to look after their dogs, and he's got a job where he's like doing night shifts, and he's running through bushes backwards, catching criminals and stuff like that. It's going to get a little bit of a chill sometime, isn't he? It's what happens. So anyway, we wish him well. Make sure you fill his timeline on Facebook and Twitter with all your get wells soons and all that. Quick shout out as well to I have a publicist, believe it or not, Sophia Chowdhury Khan. Thank you so much, very much, head of marketing and communications. She's been doing so much good. There's some really exciting stuff that should be coming up in the rest of the year and next year, sort of thing. So it's good. I'm looking forward to it. Hello everyone. Cody, Tracy, hi. Positive Jackie. Jackie, I want to know, do you have a not so positive Jackie when you're feeling a bit down? Or you're just always positive? That's what I want to know. It's these important things we need to know. Paula, hello. Nice to see you. Thank you very much supporting England. So for later today. Sharon, I wasn't going to mention it. But now you do. Oh, feel better saying, no, let's get that off. He'll get better. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He's made of tough stuff. You know, he was like South Londoner and all that, or was East Londoner? I've forgotten. But anyway, congratulations on the new book. Thank you. I'll get it over for you. That is the hard copy that I got before publish, and it says not for real sale, that one. And I just got a pretty picture up here. I'll get it over for you so that I won't mention it any more than 25 times an hour from there. But the Cornish Scoop is basically, you know, the Firearms and Fatals. There were the other bits, and I couldn't say, and these were my second best bits. I put it in a novel, and I've wrapped it around a story that you can just embellish a little bit, but it's really Cornish. It's nostalgic Cornwall. If ever you came here as a kid, it's that ice creams and sun lotion and that beach atmosphere. Do you know what I mean? Just crunching along the tarmac with the sand and with flip flops or whatever, and it's just bring that in. But it's all the policing. My main character happens by pure coincidence to have been my age when I just came out of my probation. And it's all the adventures I had or supposedly had. And that's why it's a novel, because you can write things that protect the guilty, the innocent, and everything that goes in there. So that is what that book is all about. Thank you very much. My mum has her copy ordered, being delivered tomorrow. Fantastic. Well, I hope it's good. If it's rubbish, can we just have pregnant pauses, please? Because that would probably be just better. Arthur's been a bit low. He went down to see his grandma, my mum, down. She's not so well at the moment, my mum. She's very old. and Arthur went down to cheer up a bit. So that's where I went round. I had a bit of a day in Newquay. Met John Goodman, very good friend of mine. Always good to catch up with him. Cornwall is, and this is really why I asked Colin to join us in a second, because we've just had the G7, haven't we? And everyone's talking about staycations because they're not worried. They're worried about whether people are going to change the rules again, and they suddenly have to rush back in order to avoid quarantine and things like that. And of course, I've written a novel. Did I mention that? It's also on. I've done a paperback and it's on ebook, so Kindle, that side of things. But I haven't done the audio yet. It takes quite a bit of effort, and I will do that. I promise you. But it takes a bit of time, that one. But it's all about Cornwall, I think, and I think people want to know a bit more and what it's like policing in the further depths of Cornwall, i.e., the Scilly Isles. And we'll learn a bit. You don't call it the Isles of Scilly, I believe. If you read Colin's book, you don't call it the Isles of Scilly, and he'll explain why. And if there's a reason, I don't know if there's a reason. I forget that bit, but we call it the Scilly Isles. It's a subtropical set of islands which lie 28 miles from the coast of southwest Cornwall. Many a shipwreck between and on, I tell you. And there's this guy called Wally that's been added to those shipwrecks. We'll talk about those in a minute. And well, let me introduce Colin Taylor. He's served on the islands for a total of 7 years, 2 years as a PC, 5 years later on as a sergeant. And let's just get a flavour of what it is like to police on those Cornish islands. Colin, welcome. How are you?
Harry, just for clarification, it's not the Scilly Isles, it's the Isles of Scilly or Scilly.
Did I get that wrong?
You would be my first arrest, really. Oh, that isn't an offence, obviously, but I'd be encouraged to arrest you or export you for that.
Right. I'm sentenced to read your book again because I thought I'd... Right, okay.
The definitions are right there and about the first chapter,
It is, right at the beginning. But let's just get something straight. But this idiot didn't take it in.
No, that's fair enough. You've had other things to think about, to be fair. Look at what an endeavour. Have you told anybody about the fact that you've written another book yet?
No, I'm very humble about that. I'm going to try to play it down a bit. I'm trying to play it down a bit, Colin.
But you still are working, aren't you, Harry? Because even though you're not a policeman and I am a policeman,
yeah.
Where did we both last meet?
We both last met, and I nearly caused a collision because I was driving along. A whole row of police officers. Would be the first time. I was at the G7 in Carbis Bay. And it was a beautiful, hot, sunny day. And I was driving in my civilian car, in my civilian clothing, with my newly instilled sense of freedom. Yeah. And I go past flat cap. There's the Scilly sergeant! And I automatically stick my brakes on slightly, then look at my rear view mirror like a completely badly driven civilian and realise that the car behind is quite close behind. So I better not continue with my braking, and I went on. But I actually caught up with you the next day, didn't I? So you were at G7. How did you find it?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's one of the better bit of policing that I've managed to do in my career so far. I really, really enjoyed it. Lovely people, fantastic people at St Ives, and seeing so many of our colleagues from around the country was just amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That was just amazing, wasn't it? I genuinely, because I was civilian clothing, I could walk along and listen to the conversations from members of public and the police. And I promise you, in the 3 days after everyone got there, and it was a bit of upheaval because there was a bit of accommodation issues and whatever, because I think too many people turned up at once or whatever, which wasn't the Devon and Cornwall's fault. But anyway, after that, I didn't hear one negative comment. What did you like about it? What was so good about it for you?
Well, the weather was great. The food was fantastic. What we had to do, our brief was absolutely fine. We worked out the finer points because that's what we do, isn't it? And I just found the banter between ourselves and all the people that were living in the area that I was policing was fantastic. People at St Ives and the holiday makers and stuff like that. And then the other coppers from around the country, they were brilliant.
I know. Even the Met. I'm just, if anyone from the Met listening, I'm only kidding. All right. I love the Met. I love the Met officers.
No, they were brilliant. You know, we would have the Met. To be fair to them, you know, they took the line's work of the night shifts. So they came on when we were coming, when we were leaving during the day. They came on at night to do the terrible hours, really, and they were brilliant. They were all buoyed up and, you know, all smart and polite and absolutely fantastic. I couldn't say better for any of my colleagues that I met there. Really, I didn't nobody let anything down that I saw.
It was a genuine feeling that everyone had, and members. I was listening to a Radio Cornwall on the way after it, on back, and the residents were saying, "Oh, we were a little bit nervous at it at the start. We thought it was going to really mess our day, but we want them back next year. We really got to know PC so and so from Northumbria, and then the afternoon shift was from so from the Met. We're going to miss them. The kids are going to miss them. You know, it was really a great PR exercise."
It was. I mean, that wasn't what it was about, but that's what, you know, what many officers made of it, really, and took the opportunity to kind of go, oh, actually, this is quite nice. This is why I like the best bits of policing, basically, talking to members of the public and having the members of the public talking back to you. And if that had been a consistent thing, not that you can have 6,000 coppers in St Ives for the rest of eternity, but, you know, if that had been consistent, you know, after a period of months and that, people would have been talking about very meaningful policing issues to those officers, and those officers would then be able to carry that forward to their day's work, I think. So that would have been, really good.
And you had your own little Carbis Bay in this idyllic island, but there are some shortfalls of this. There's some advantages and some disadvantages, isn't it? In the Isles of Scilly.
Yeah, so so just to geographically place it, because not everybody knows where the Isles of Scilly is, and indeed I didn't before I went there, really. I knew it was somewhere off the coast because it says islands. So I went to, so that if you go to St Ives, which is down the sharp end, which is the pointy end of Cornwall, and then you just carry on going west, you hit Land's End, and then if you swim for about 28 miles, you're going to hopefully, like Wally the Walrus, you're going to hit the Isles of Scilly. And it's a bunch of 5 inhabited islands and about 100 rocks, basically.
And how big is the police force there? And it is Devon and Cornwall Police, isn't it? Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Yeah, that's
correct. It's just a bit of a mouthful, really. So we just call it Devon and Cornwall, but it is Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, because the Isles of Scilly is its own unitary authority. So how big is the complement there? The policing complement. So at the moment, it's 1 sergeant, 2 PCs, and 1 PCSO. And we'd always take as many specials as possible, but generally speaking, there's only 1 member of the community that generally steps out and becomes a special constable at any time, really. And then when they hang up their boots after doing sterling service, then we generally recruit for another special constable. So it's a tight little complement of pretty much 4/5.
Now, and of course you get holiday makers, and you can get quite drunk people, and you can get people with mental health problems. You can have all the same problems on the mainland, but on an island, which when you press your emergency button, how long roughly before assistance would arrive, if that was the case?
It depends on the weather. And the tides. But if the weather and the tides are conducive, you might get support. Well, you'll get backup from whoever's on the islands with you. So if I was there as the sergeant and I pressed my button, I would get at least 2 PCs potentially coming to my assistance, and they could get to me if I was on St Mary's, the main island. They'll get to me in 10-15 minutes. Probably.
Yeah.
If I was on a distant island, on Tresco, St Martin, St Mary, St Agnes, or Briar, or something like that, I would expect probably 3 hours, something like that.
No,
but if we're looking for people like yourselves to turn up from the mainland, it could be days, possibly even weeks.
I mean, there was occasionally, it was a sort of firearms incident that maybe it was brewing or whatever, and they were thinking about helicoptering us out there. And, well, I mean, it's a long flight from Exeter to Camborne, from the helicopter to get to Camborne to then fly out to you guys. It's still, even in the aid of a helicopter that you can order tomorrow, like now, I mean. It's still going to take a while. So did you? You're relying on locals, but at the end of the day, the buck stopped there. There was no one else, was there?
No. Well, you'd have people, as long as you've policed on the Monday in expectation of what might go wrong on the Tuesday, you might have a good reception from the locals. If you turned up and policed on the Monday and been, not the sort of policeman they want there, really, then you could find yourself having a hard time. So I really pulled up all times, night and day, to go and deal with things. We weren't able to police 24 hours a day because, with a complement of 3 sworn officers, it's just not possible. So there was very little night term working. We might work till 2 o'clock on a Friday night, for instance, Saturday morning, but after that, it's basically comms from Plymouth would phone you up in your bed and say, there's a fight, I'm afraid you need to wake up and go and deal with something. And so that's what we find ourselves doing.
You describe yourself as often your uniform was on over your pajamas, walking down the high street.
I've turned up to incidents and fought with people, and when I made arrests, and I've got my tartan pajamas on underneath my uniform. Yeah.
And then you pretty much take them to your house, don't you? That's the thing, where the custody box, it's really sort of old style policing, isn't it? Your police house was attached to it.
The 3 sworn staff, the PC and the 2 constables, live in a one block, which is one flat there with 3 bedrooms, one flat there with 3 bedrooms, a flat below with 2 bedrooms, and a police station with its own cells. So basically, you're living with your own ensuite police station. And you're right. When you make an arrest, if you in those few occasions when you do, say 15 to 20 times a year, then you're taking the detainee effectively to what feels like your home.
And one of which was somebody who was drunk and decided to steal a 25-kilogram anchor.
Well, he didn't actually arrest him in the end, because I think I took him to a chiropractor. I think when you try to make an anchor, it does its job. It just keeps you rooted to the spot. Really.
So it wasn't a fast pursuit foot chase then.
No.
So you came to fame really in a very big way because your Facebook likes on the Isles of Scilly, then your Facebook likes there actually were bigger than the Force's Facebook.
They were bigger than the White House at one point.
They were bigger than what?
They're bigger than the White House. And there were, I think at a point I was rivaling other police forces like New York and New Zealand police, some Australian police, stuff. I was certainly rivaling Devon and Cornwall and exceeding.
And this was because of your whole tone, wasn't it? Really, I mean, here's one really, which you're sort. We were discussing this earlier. Your one-liners as such, and perhaps you can remember. There's actually a fried egg on the bottom there, and this just shows how something was really, really popular on Facebook. I forget how many likes it had. Maybe you remember, and then the conversation. But your sort of one-liners with this are just iconic. But it's quite humbling. You're not saying, "Oh yeah, we're the big." You've got a very serious job to do. But this is how you attracted the audience, so they would listen to the more serious stuff as well. How did this sort of photograph develop? Because this developed then, didn't it?
I can really remember that one quite vividly. You know, not all policing moments I can remember vividly, but that one, for whatever reason, I know it went a bit ballistic, but was just a case of turning up on a Tuesday morning, having a look to see what had been reported, if indeed anything had been reported, and there was a break into a shed. So I thought, well, you know, there's no evidence. It's not the sort of thing, generally speaking, anyone would really turned out for, because there's going to be nothing forensic. So it could have just easily been left and filed. But I said, no, come on, Shirley, who was the PCSO at the time, Shirley Graham, who's still the PCSO there. I said, grab your coat, let's go and see what the shed break's about. And so we turned up and spoke to it was off the school, spoke to the janitor, and you know, the doors had been forced open, and there was a little split in the door, and the doors had been a bit broken, and right there on the floor in the dew was what, to all intents and purposes, was the fried egg, you know, in the middle of a field by a shed. And so I just said to Shirley, look, just point down there and point if you're pointing kind of at the crack, but also a bit at the fried egg. And I took a photograph and I pumped something out that said, look, there's been a break into a shed at the school. We just want an amicable sort of arrangement for clearing this up. Somebody admit it, please. It was, footballs were kicked about and stuff like that. And the salient point was there was a fried egg at the scene. And left with that, and kind of just fired that one off and thought nothing more of it really. And it just went nuts. And people came back. That was a Facebook thing, a little bit of Twitter, but mostly Facebook. And people just knocked themselves out with puns and egg-based puns and the fun of it. And it just, I think, if anything, my skill was just hitting a slow news day time and time again because it just went nuts. Have I got news for you? Picked up on it as well. So they saw a photograph and thought, oh, that's funny, because it was. And they said to me, can we have the photograph? And to be fair to them, they said, yeah, let's we'll buy it from you for a period of time. So they bought it from me. It was £100. I gave the £100 to the football so they could mend their shed. So I didn't benefit from it. So it just went straight, which felt quite nice, really. Yeah. And then have I got news for you? Have it. And they, when Angus Deaton or whoever it was comes up at the end of the comes up at the end of the thing and shows the photographs, and they have to come up with clever witticisms and something. They kind of couldn't come up with anything because I'd done the joke. Because I was self-depreciating humour and aping myself a little bit, and us as the police. And they just didn't have anywhere to go with it. So it kind of became just my joke.
I get what you mean, because they're looking at the quintessential England, how very English we are with our little shed burglaries and our little... And yet you've come along and you've put the joke on yourself. You're not saying this is a terrible thing. You're saying, look, we're treating it seriously because somebody's had communities had their shed damaged and whatever. But you got that little trick, I know, where you've got that little twist where you stick something in there that then catches the attention of others, but because you've done that already, the joke didn't really work, you're saying, for Have I Got News for You, because you'd already taken the mick out of yourself. So there's nothing for them to do that.
Yeah, there wasn't anything.
It's a very good way.
Just to point out, there was a proper investigation with it. It went and saw it was obviously kids opening the doors for a kickabout with the football and just wanted to sort of see if anyone was going to fess up. And nobody did. We did an assembly and stood there and said, is anyone going to own up to this? And still to this day, I wouldn't have a clue who it was. And that's probably not important, really, because the door got mended and the kids all got told.
Exactly. And there was some very pro-police stuff going on as well. I'm going to just mention this, actually, because this is something with Finn's Law Part 2. I will do this because I'm getting a lot of harassment on the comments here. I was going to leave this till afterwards. That's my excuse. But I have to say, Finn's Law Part 2 is done and dusted now. It's ready to use. It's in law. They can use it. Let's hope they do use it. And Dave, I've got to say, he's probably a bit knackered, to be quite frank, because of all the work he's done in order to achieve what he's done here. With some very good friends of his that managed to do it, but absolutely phenomenal accomplishment. So it is in law, it's in the statutes or whatever. I don't really know what that means. I know I'm a police officer, I'm far more clever, but it is everywhere now that they can have imprisonment for 5 years now, and that's for Finn's Law Part 2, civilian dogs. Like the equivalent of me, and police officer dogs and services like prison dogs and things like that. So that's really, really good news. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, brilliant.
So Facebook as well. And this is what I want to know about. And this is why policing is people who join the police and they think, oh, right, okay, you've got to use your initiative all the time, because you were getting reports of a drink driver, I think, but it was because it was on the other islands and you have tides. So the islands are actually separated with tides, and at some points you just cannot reach the other islands, can you? Without
correct, yeah, you can't get there.
So, and you can't just say, well, that's okay. Is it almost like the locals of any island? I'm not just talking about the Isles of Sea. It's almost like they think maybe, well, we're our own place here. You're a police officer, you do what we want you to do and we'll just be fine. But you've got to have that line of acceptability of how much you sort of give a little bit. But I noticed in the book as well, you would insist on seatbelts, you would insist on, and I bet if you weren't there, the the temptation to not wear seatbelts on the island by people thinking, oh, well, I'm never going to be in an accident. We don't go fast enough and things. How did you actually get that line? And how did you deal with the drink driver in the end that was on the other island?
I'll take them in order. I mean, the drink driver was, I took a stance. I'm not a traffic man, like you were, like you kind of are really. You're a traffic man.
Sort of.
Yeah. Don't know about statutes, but I'm not a traffic man. So before I got to the Isles of Scilly, I'd have made one arrest for drink driving in my career in 16 years or whatever it was up to that point, which is just rubbish. But plenty of robberies and stuff like that, but not drink driving. So I didn't really know, and I was also one of my PCs, the one I mainly worked with. He was also of the same ilk as me. I think he had like 2 arrests for drink driving, and neither of us really knew what to do. So we thought, well, let's grip the nettle here and see if we can do something, because we are being told that there's drink driving going on. So we thought, okay, let's do what we can. So we figured out how the breath box worked. We figured out all the words, stop cars, and all that sort of thing. And it became actually quite enjoyable to do. We were enjoyable as it isn't a challenge. We were doing what we were paid to do and not shying away from it. So we managed to do that. And in a period of 18 months, I think we arrested something like 16 people for drink drive, which was more than had been done on Scilly for a long time. Not everybody ultimately was convicted, because some people at the end of the day didn't have sufficient alcohol in their body to prosecute them. Anyway, that side. But one of the upshots was that, as I got told about a drink driver on one of the off islands. Now they're very challenging to get to, because you get told that somebody's drink driving, and then you've got to get to that island, and then you've got to get without a vehicle, so you're on foot the whole time or on a bike, and then you've got to then see if you can catch them drink driving for a start, and that's quite difficult if you're on foot and they're in
be there at the right time.
Be there at the right time. You're hours behind the point of call, etc. And then you've got to, if you do make an arrest, then you've got to get back.
Yeah.
And how do you do all that sort of thing? And so I got a call one morning, and that alerted me to the fact that somebody was drink driving on one of the islands. I realised I couldn't get across there on a boat that was readily accessible straight to that island. So I had to get on a boat to one of the other islands, Tresco.
Yeah.
Then I would have about 1.5 miles to get down from one quay on Tresco to another quay. And I was trying to scratching my head on how to do this. And there was a little lad on the boat with me. I can still remember. He's a chap called Isaac. And he was a regular visitor to the island. And he said, "What's your problem?" And I said, "I can't get from Carnear to New Grimsby." So he said, "Well, I've got a bike. It's at Carnear," which is one of the things. He said, "You can borrow it if you want." So I said, "All right, thank you very much, Isaac." So I borrowed his bike and rode from Carnear to New Grimsby, then saw somebody going across on a little punt who I knew, and I had their phone number. So I phoned him up and said, "Can you get me across to Briar?"
Yeah.
And he picked me. I hitchhiked basically, and got across to Briar right at the time. Got right in the position where I needed to be. The van came past like it was just planned, and the man blew over the limit. And then I saw another boat travelling back towards St Mary's, and I went, "Well, I know who that is, so I'll phone you up," and hitchhike back to St Mary's with my man, and it worked.
That's phenomenal. And by the time you got him back, was he stone cold sober?
No, it all worked like clockwork. It was like everybody was there just to sort of help at that point in time, and it just absolutely worked. Yeah.
So for your book, I think this was taken. I don't think this was the actual bike, was it? But you were on a child's bike, weren't you?
I was on a child's bike, yeah. And so before I set off, I thought, this is just so bizarre. So I'm just landed at Carnear. Isaac had given me his bike. He'd said, "You can ride that." I thought, it's a bit of a career moment, this one. This is ridiculous. So I handed my phone to somebody, because all the tourists who got off the boat as well went, "Oh, this is funny. Policeman in a hat on a bike." And so they started taking photographs, gave them my thingy. They took my photograph, and I shot off on that bike. And I had the wind in my ears and in my flares.
So was it that bike?
I think that, it's 6 or 7 years after that event. And I think the publishers added the tassels.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think I did the wasn't
I would have loved it. I'm reading your book, and I was reading your book, and I was thinking, God, can you imagine if there was a bicycle pursuit around the island? You know, you're calling it in.
We used golf buggies to get around, all sorts. You know, if we could get around, we would. You first thing you did when you went off island is try to get some means of transport, and that tractors, golf buggies.
And so, I mean, somebody's asked here, right? This is a very personal question. So, okay, how would the Scilly Isles police the Isles of Scilly, not the Scilly Isles?
Scilly, you can call it Scilly.
All right, call it Scilly. Yeah. So, how would the Scilly? We're all learning together here, Maria. To deal with the loons that insist on pestering Wally, the walrus, local celebrity from here in the South Wales. I have some photos of Wally here, and he's actually causing quite a lot of antisocial behaviour himself. I'll have you know.
Well, let's put that in context for anyone who doesn't know. Then, so there's a walrus has come from Russia and Greenland, and this Wally, the walrus. I don't suppose that's his real name. He's probably called Brian or something, but we've called him Wally. And he turned up in somewhere off Cornwall, and somebody shooed him off a lifeboat slip with a foghorn and a broom at some point, and a lovely shot of that was taken. And then he disappeared and he went to France. But I think he had to. It was lockdown or something, and he couldn't stay there for very long. He didn't speak French, so he came back and he found his way to Scilly. So he then turned up on St Mary's.
There's got gin and tonic in this one, I'm sure.
Yeah, a little bit of sort of walrus natural history is they like to bask on ice floes, and the only ice floes you got on the Isles of Scilly or the near to are people's boats. So he just kind of climbs onto people's boats and slumbers there, and then goes off and eats a few clams, and then comes back and sleeps on boats again. And the first photograph you showed is him actually having sunk somebody's boat.
He did literally sink their boat.
Yeah, the problem is with him and those inflatables is when he climbs up, he's got those big tusks that come out, and what he does is he digs those into the inflatable and that bursts it, and I think people have lost their inflatables through it.
I mean, it's huge, isn't it? And those tusks, like you say, they're going to burst through those inflatables, and they're segmented, aren't they? The inflatables, but they're going to cause horrendous damage. But he's huge, and I wouldn't like to persuade him off with a caution.
No, and he's so to answer the serious question that somebody's asked there is, what do you do about it? Well, I don't know. I haven't really contemplated it. You know, if somebody's worrying a walrus. What do you do? I really don't know. I'm afraid it's educative. You've got to be educative about it, and you've got to explain things. And to be honest, we'd probably it'll be the wildlife trusts who would be leading on that, and they would be talking about, what the impact on that mammal and that sort of thing. I mean, ultimately, what happens is that he may become a permanent fixture. We had a great. Go on. We had a dolphin that turned up. Nick, he was called. He had a nick out of his dorsal fin.
Oh, right. Okay.
And he turned up and he chased boats all around the southern tip of Cornwall for a couple of months, and then followed the lifeboat back to St Mary's one day and stayed in St Mary's. But we know he was a he because he used to go upside down underneath the glass bottom boat
and flash.
And flash. So we did actually kind of have sort of.
They do have bits to flash, right? Okay. I guess the biology of a dolphin. Yeah. I guess it has to happen somehow. Yeah, and I can't. Yeah, good. Glass bottom boats. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But you also another way of getting your message across the island, and this is what I want is you had a radio show as well, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Criminal Records.
Criminal Records. What a name! What a name! Simple is best.
Yeah, simple as best. So what I did was, and I really enjoyed it, I must admit. It was just my way of engaging with the public. There was a Radio Scilly was on the island. The owner and main DJ for that, a chap called Kerry Jones, just gave sessions to members of the Isles of Scilly to do a session of radio. And so I took on, other people would take on all sorts of sporting stuff and top tens and things like that. And I well, I'll do one as well. So I did this construct where I was the sergeant, because I am. So I wasn't trying not to be me. And I had a single guest every week who we would mock it up as if I was booking them into custody for the first time. And so I would give them all their rights, and some of those rights would be a little bit worked, if you like, and give them a caution. And they would then, and one of the things that we recover from them is their MP3 or whatever with their list of songs on it. And they had to prove to me it was theirs. So I would ask them their right, what book do you want to read? And they'd talk about the book they wanted. Then I'd say, tell me a record from your MP3. And they'd say, oh, it's the, the Buzzcocks, Ever Fall in Love or something like that. And then I would play that, and then I'd go on to do some more. But I stayed in character as the sergeant. They stayed in character as the prisoner. And then we played by records as well. And it worked brilliantly. It was a brilliant thing. We did about 36 episodes of that and interviewed all sorts of people.
That's incredible. But then I suppose you run out of guests on the island, surely. You can't
like you know, Harry, these things aren't just as simple as just switching a camera on. They take a lot of effort and stuff like that. And I had to edit my show as well. So I spent an hour recording it and then 3 hours editing it. And that takes some time. And 36 episodes is a creditable sort of effort, really, I think so.
It really is impressive, mate. Really impressive the way, and that was the thing, because you were really at the pioneering stage. I know that people started Facebook and Twitter and police long way back, but it really started to roll, and we started to learn with it. And I know myself, I started to learn that it wasn't. I just thought, well, as long as I intend well, and as long as I'm not malicious or don't say anything terrible, then I'll be fine. And I realized it didn't actually work like that. But you had a lovely little just the way you used to speak in your Facebook that attracted people in. What was did you do that before? Was there something, or did you just think, oh, try this Facebook thing and see if we can grab guests with it and see how we go?
So what happens, I had Twitter first.
Right.
Obviously I knew what Facebook was, but I had Twitter, and I didn't really want to use any social media, but it was a bit about the radio show, not my radio show, but just the fact that the radio show was reporting things. And when I arrived on Scilly in 2011 as a sergeant, there was all sorts of stuff going on there that was really quite uncomfortable for some people within other organisations, not the policing. And people were being kind of found out, and there was a bit of investigative journalism going on that actually meant some people left their jobs. And I thought, you know what, I don't think I've got the I don't think I could stand that if somebody was saying things about me that weren't true, for instance, and or commenting on my style and stuff like that, because I'm not as thick-skinned as I'd like to be. So I thought, I want people to reference straight off of me rather than off of the mainstream media, if you like.
Yeah.
So I started pumping things out on Twitter, and effectively that got ahead of whoever was the the journalist at the time.
Brilliant.
And as a result of that, I was able to protect myself in many respects. And then another colleague of mine was using Facebook at the time, the Isles of Scilly Police Facebook page, which doesn't exist anymore. And he was using it, and he was using it in a very light-hearted way. And I thought, oh, that's really clever. So I started using it. He then left. I continued with it, and it just snowballed. And I realised anything that was slightly vitriolic and you will do this, you will wear seatbelts, and that sort of thing. Didn't get any currency, and what leapt on were trolls and stuff like that, who just also wanted to say, yeah. But if I was really light-hearted, the message still went across, and in fact, it went across better. And people then joined in the humour of it, which then increased the value of it.
That's really interesting you say that, because the first time I met you actually I was on a VIP job, and I was doing the recce's, I think, at that point, or it was for the job before they got there, and it was Duke and Duchess Cornwall, Charles and Camilla. And so I met you, and I heard you, I think, before I saw you, because you went, Sergeant Tanguy or Sergeant Harry or Twitter Tanguy or something. And I was like, Colin, bit of fan zoned with you. I was like, oh, it's Colin, it's the Scilly sergeant. And then
Garrison Hill, I remember it well.
Oh yeah, I was. Then it was next thing. I was in your house, and we were talking about social media and through all the platforms you were using and things like that, and giving me sort of really useful nuggets of advice. And I suppose that's the real thing, is the fact you can get the word in first. But I learned you had to be quite humble and self-deprecating, but not in a way where you're going, "Oh look, poor me." That's horrible. I don't like that. I don't like it when for example, it would backfire if I did a few jobs at work, which were absolutely, those jobs now and then, it was like absolutely brilliant. You catch 2 bank robbers or something,
Yeah.
And there was no way you could say on Twitter, "Today I caught 2 bank robbers." It's like, look at me, everyone, pat me on the head and say how lovely I am. Right. It doesn't work. It's sickening. And that's why my motto was, I strive for adequate. But, because as long as I can achieve adequate. And I found personally that did work for me. And it seems similar to what you're saying. And there was, exactly. And people don't want serious stuff. They don't want, oh, look, there we are. Can you see us talking there? But this is your Twitter page. So it's Colin J. Taylor, or Colin _ Taylor, OR. But I'm sure if you just search Colin Taylor, you'll see.
Scilly Sergeant.
Yeah, used to be Scilly Sergeant. Right. Okay. So that's the Twitter one. So follow that, everyone, because that is a direct request from Dawn.
Dawn's asked if there's a Facebook page. Dawn, there isn't anymore. I don't serve in the Isles of Scilly anymore, so I have no purpose to post on their behalf. That wouldn't be right anyway. And it seemed to be the case that after I left, there was colossal numbers of followers on that Facebook page, and the others just weren't interested. The people who took on after me weren't interested in being who I was and writing things. It does take a long time. And so it kind of folded, and it was probably right to have folded, to be fair, because it wasn't fair on the people who were there that they should be.
You've definitely got to want to do it. It's got to be an urge that you think, do you know what? I get satisfaction from getting the community to go, oh, hang on a minute. The cops aren't so bad after all. Ah, okay. Now you've got their attention. Now you can talk to them. We were talking before. Is like my Twitter tends to be the sort of the shop window of the humorous stuff you used to put in and whatever, and then you get their attention. Now you've got an audience that you can say the serious stuff to.
Yes.
And it's that getting that mix. Now you did something about a recruiting thing once, didn't you? And you left it for the weekend, and you went away, or you went on mainland or something. You went away. What was that? And that got you a few followers.
So one of my PCs left, and when somebody leaves, you've got to recruit again. And it's only ever going to be from Devon and Cornwall. It's only ever going to be another police officer from Devon and Cornwall. But I thought, I'm going to knock myself out of here a little bit and put a post out. So I put out a little bit of a spoof post saying, the best policing job in the world is coming up for grabs. You've got to know how to solve an argument between 2 arguing chefs who are arguing about the rock salt and mineral salt, or sea salt. Or you've got to be able to wrestle a seal. You've got to be able to give your wife a parking ticket such that you don't have to find dinner and the dog thereafter, and all that sort of thing. And because it's kind of relevant. So I put this little spoof thing out, and that just went banzai. It really did, but I put it out I put it out on a Thursday, and on the Friday I had to go away with my kids and my family to the Cornwall to go to a judo trip. It's just a dad thing, taking kids to do a judo tournament. So we ended up in a Holiday Inn or not Holiday Inn, one of those legendary holiday places. We stayed there, and I found that people were phoning my mobile the whole time saying, "Hi, Colin, we're from New Zealand. We'd like to interview you. Hi, Colin, I'm from Texas. I'd like to interview you about this. Hi, Colin, it's the Daily Mail here. We'd like to interview you about this. Hi, Colin, it's Tom. What have you done?"
I've had comms messages like that, but not as big as that. Your initial reaction, your blood must have drained from your face.
Well, because there was nothing I could do. I couldn't go back and take the post down or anything because I was away from it, and I didn't have control of it where I was. I couldn't really see what was going on. My forehead was sweating the whole time. I was in this, you know, in this hotel, and I couldn't do anything. And I had multiple sort of media interviews to do, and I thought, cool, then I'll do them. And I found myself doing an interview with Radio New Zealand, their equivalent of Radio 4, I think, at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning to catch their tail end, to catch from a broom cupboard in the hotel, because that was the only place I could get a reception and not be disturbed. And I couldn't do it with my family there because I was wake them up. So I found I'm in a dark broom cupboard with buckets all around me and coats hanging here and stuff like that, doing an interview in New Zealand. And I'm thinking, I may have overstepped my mark here.
I mean, how many actually, can you remember the figures involved? How many people actually applied or whatever, you know, or showed their interest? Because some people seriously, didn't they?
That was that particular post. I think something like 250,000 people saw it, and of course you couldn't actually apply. It was only officers in Devon and Cornwall, and we got good candidates from that. But there were people who were actually phoning up the police station saying, I found your number somewhere online, and I'd like to apply. And I'm Spanish. We had Greek, we had Spanish. I know we had German. We had Texan. We had people from all over the place phoning up with almost no appreciable levels of English as well. You know, saying, "Oh, I'd like to work with you."
Yeah, good. That was a safe accent to choose, wasn't it? No, but the thing is, as well, it sounds idyllic and great, but I imagine when you're on the beach with your kids and you're in your budgie smugglers, and then somebody comes along and says, Sergeant Taylor, I need to speak to you about a theft of this, whatever, you know, it's just never being off duty, and you've been caught in supermarkets, haven't you, with your arms full and people giving you, you know, it must be tiresome like that. Surely you were quite glad to get away from that as well.
Well, at the time it's tiresome, but 5 minutes later or an hour later, when you reflect on it, you're thinking, no, you know what, it's a lovely place. It's a beautiful place. You look around, you see how you've been there. You've seen how beautiful it is. You thank your lucky stars. You've got a job. You're healthy. You're living in one of the wealthiest nations in the world. You know, and the fact that, you know, an example, you know, say in the supermarket, I'd been called off duty to assist a colleague to deal with a domestic violence matter. So I rushed to wherever the scene was. I didn't have much of my kit at all because I had to get off my boat. I was fishing at the time. Got off my boat, ran up to where the thing was, and there was a chap there, and we spoke, and it was all very nice and passive and calm. But basically, he was a little bit drunk, and we'd gone back to the police station. He was arrested, and then bailed from the police station. Who it is totally irrelevant, but you know, I had that interaction with somebody where I'm being the policeman, I am arresting you, I am booking you into custody.
Formal process.
And then he walks out of the police station after the end of that, and I go, you know what, I'm going to go back and I've got to look after the kids now. It was another judo night, I think. So my wife was working somewhere else. It was my turn. I had to get them food. It was sort of 5:45. What do I do? That dad moment. Down to the co-op, which is 5-minute walk away. Fish fingers, ice cream, stuff like that. And I'm carrying this all to the front. This is straight after that, and I'm now in the sort of clothing. And I get to the front of the counter and put it all down, and somebody beeps it all through, and then I pat my thing, and I haven't got my wallet because that's all stuck back in my kit with my.
No money that excuse there,
And I need about £5 or something to pay for this, and a hand came from behind me and just handed me a £5 note, and it was the bloke I'd just arrested.
No, that's amazing.
He said, "Hey, Col, I think you need some money, don't you? You can pay me back later." So, okay, fair enough.
I mean, that's amazing, and
that's the way it works.
How rewarding is that? I remember many years ago in Dawlish, where a lot of my book is based actually, but it's in Cornwall, where I was born and brought up. I was especially in Cornwall as well, so there's good links there. But it was a very similar atmosphere with the locals, right?
Yeah.
And so I ended up arresting this guy for nicking car stereos. You know, when car stereos, you could nick them, you could get them out the dashboard in those old days.
Yeah.
And I used to nick him. And then about a couple of weeks later, I was involved in I completely misjudged a waiting for backup before I go into a pub situation. Thought I'll be all right. Anyway, both me, a couple of yobs, and all his friends came bursting out the pub onto the ground and absolutely having the scrap of my life. And I lost my wedding ring. And a day later, he walked into the station and he said, "I think this is yours, PC Tanguy." He says, and I went, "Wow, okay." And he went, "Yeah, you treated me fairly," he says, "and it's an important thing for you." And I thought, really instills your faith in people again, you know?
What is that, isn't it? Treating somebody fairly. Being fair, being honest.
Being fair, exactly.
Yeah, I've got a job to do, and it might not be something that you want me to do at this point in time, but I'm going to do it properly. And if I say this is what I'm going to do, that's what I will do, be that good or bad for you.
Yeah.
And people like that trust.
But the other thing as well, you had quite serious jobs. You had the drugs importation there, didn't you? And it was quite a sad ending with that one, wasn't it? Wasn't it?
That was I know that, you know, I've talked about some funny stuff, but you know, a lot of my posts as well were very serious, because with the funny stuff you gain the traction for the serious stuff. When you need
exactly that.
And you know, that was a serious one. So a boat was offshore. This almost isn't my story to tell, because I wasn't involved. I'd gone to the mainland for the biggest policing event of the whole time. I just happened to be on the mainland watching it on the news like everyone else. So I got away. A boat was escorted into St Mary's Harbour. It was a yacht, and it was broken or something. It was drifting, and it had been for a while. Escorted in, and for whatever reasons, Border Force are interested in it, so they steamed full ahead for the Isles of Scilly. Got to the Isles of Scilly, decided they're going to search it. Searched all over the boat. The lone sailor on it climbed the mast and did a swan dive from the top of the mast straight onto the quay and died. And no, that's not too graphic for everybody, but in the boat itself was some 20 million or something in cocaine. So he probably was contemplating his fate, not
couldn't face the consequences of losing it all, basically.
That's the one. You know, these things do have serious consequences, don't they? And that was a big price to pay for that, really. Very, very sad, very, very tragic.
But it just shows all those stories and years gone by about smuggling and stuff like that. It's still going on, isn't it? It's all still going around the coast, and all these little boats and little hamlets where people are trying to get ill-gotten gains. It's tends not to be rum anymore. It tends to be drugs and people, probably, as well, unfortunately. But it just shows you still have to have that level of, you know, keeping your eyes open and relying on the public around you, you know, to be your eyes and ears, isn't it, really? It must have been that the relationship you had with the islanders. But did it, go on.
Well, so it is that relationship. So when you do recognise, and I remember when I was there the first time round in 1998, I did 2 years there and saw the Millennium in. And that was when I saw that, and I was very keen. You know, I was 3 years into being a police officer, and all these, you know, got to deal with everything, and realised that very few people were wearing seatbelts. So I did a little sort of, you know, count how many people wearing seatbelts and stuff. It was about 20% of people were wearing seatbelts, and I'm thinking probably need to up those and up that, see if we can get somewhere. But if you start going and just handing out tickets to every driver, you're a busted flush. You're not going to be able to police that island for very much longer thereafter. So you've got to find very creative ways. And this is long before social media. So you've got to find creative ways of, you know, encouraging people to wear their seatbelts, explaining and stuff like that. And you do have the opportunity to do that. And it might not be at that point in time where you're stopping a vehicle on the road. You might notice a vehicle and then have that conversation a little bit later. See if that makes a difference. You know, and I managed to up it to about 21% people.
I don't envy you with that, especially when your first days going into that place, because people have judged the police on the previous person. To come in, well, it's not how it's done here. You know, we don't do it around like you. You know, you're a foreigner coming from the mainland, coming in here, treading on all that. You can very quickly, and then we'll be talking about you in the pub. and put you've got to tread so carefully, haven't you? And yet maintain the law, so that because you'll be just as disrespected if you allowed everyone to get away with everything willy-nilly, wouldn't you?
But it's going to be very much like that in small places in Devon and Cornwall, and probably all around the UK, small villages and stuff like that. Lots of places are quite isolated from other people, and Scilly is unique. It's got a funny name and that sort of thing, but it's not dissimilar from many places around our shores and Ireland, and we police with consent, and we police without firearms by and large. I know your Firearms and Fatals is your book, but even you appreciate that we policing without everyone having firearms is a
exactly you've got to get them inside, and that's why I do a lot of learn to live type stuff, which is the I did do, and I'm hosting a parents one this year. It's about empowering people to have power over their destiny in a car when they're young, and then get into a car and they can actually find ways without feeling embarrassed and awkward to say, excuse me, drive, can you just slow down a minute? Or you're getting distracted on your phone, or you're showing off a little bit. And it's just making it socially unacceptable to do that now, and things have changed. It even comes down, but you've just got to bring people along with you is so much more effective than going ticket, because then you stop people speaking to you and giving you information, because you become the enemy, don't you?
Yes.
It is. I don't envy that. It must have been very tough, and the fact that you couldn't get away, and all eyes are on you every time, and they'll be looking for you to just cut that corner. Yeah. Did you park where you shouldn't have? They'll be the first to jump on it, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So,
and as the sergeant, of course, you're looking out for yourself and looking out for your PCs as well, because some turn up, they're new, and you've got to blood them to some extent and sort of say it doesn't quite work like it does in the mainland. You just can't walk around with your big book of tickets here, or you can't just stop and pause on that yellow line that 20 minutes later you're going to be trying to enforce. Exactly
that. And you can have just as many as your own stresses in life to think, I'll be all right for a second. No, I can't do it. But were you approached about your book, and you got a few copies there, and there's a couple of different languages as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, we've both got different journeys into writing, haven't we? We've both written about our exploits, and you've taken that great leap of writing a fiction about including detail from your exploits. But in essence, you've gone down the self-publishing route. I went down the route where somebody came to me and said, "Will you write a book for us?"
Yeah, so they were interested in you.
Yeah, I got lucky. There's no two ways about it. And the Facebook thing and the Twitter thing, particularly the Facebook thing, gave me that currency. Yeah. So the result of that, journalists wrote things. They were all bored and watch Facebook, don't they? And then they write about what they've just read. And so I got an awful lot of traction there. Publishers phoned up, agent phones up and says, "Will you write a book?" And I said, "Look, get these publishers off my back. I'll do what you want." And so when they do that, and then we've both had to do the hard yards of sitting down and thinking, what am I going to do?
Where do we start?
And when we both made a fist of that, really. And so I wrote a book, wrote Life for Scilly Sergeant, which was published by Penguin and Random House, which is big imprint, and I'm very happy with that. And I got a lot of assistance with that. So I had a great editor, a lady called Ida Vucic, who's who's just fantastic, and she sort of held my hand and sort of turned up on day one. I actually came to the Isles of Scilly, and I took her fishing and stuff like that. And she said, "Look,
she must have hated it."
She must have hated it. She got that gig. She wanted to go to Scilly. So what they did there is they effectively stumped up what's called an advance. So without going into some of the sort of more sordid bits of it, we get paid differently. I got paid in advance, and
that would really scare me. I'd feel so scared with an advance. I know it's how the proper authors like you do, because you were actually a commissioned author, and that would scare me to death, because then I'd start to think my brain would just go.
I'm more scared now about it than I was at the time. So at the time, I was told, "Look, we'd like a book," and this was in about August of 2015. We'd like a book, signed on the dotted line, okay. And I said, "When do you want it by?" And they said, "End of December." Okay. Can you give me a little bit longer than that, please? So they gave me till March. So I had to write something between August and March. I also had to do my job, which is my policing job, but it was during the winter on Scilly, and it gets a little bit quiet there. So I wasn't doing too much overtime in essence, and I just switched off the TV, didn't watch any TV. I'd do my shift, come home, write, go to bed, get up, write, go out, do a shift, come back, write, and I just stayed in the zone doing that.
Yeah.
However writers get through it, they all do it, but that's the way I did it for that book.
Yeah.
And I what did I want? They just said to me, I said to them, what do you want from me? And they said, write what you want. And I said, okay, is that it? And they said, well, just make it warm and humorous.
Right.
And that was it. Warm and humorous was actually in the contract. Make it warm and humorous. Okay. So that's what I did. And that stuck with me ever since. And that stuck with me all the way through. I just made it warm, kept it light, kept it warm and humorous. There's no axe to grind. There's no gory details and stuff
People
like
want
that.
Escapism, don't they? They just want to imagine being
not who I am. And I wasn't going to do it. And I don't hope there's not a lot of glory in it and stuff like that. It's not about that. It's not about saying I got her. It's about saying, this is a bizarre place to have to do this stuff, this policing, and this is what goes through the mind of someone who's doing it. And I think had I been anybody, they all have those sorts of experiences. So the guy who's there now, Darren White, who's the sergeant who's there now, I'm sure he's having just the same sort of experience. He's got Wally. He's got Wally.
He's having to bring in a public order team or something and divers. Get the divers in.
I would rinse that one if I was
get AJ's lot in there. They can do battle with Wally or do in the nicest possible way.
They want to get in the water with a walrus because they've got a big suck they can suck your brains out.
They can suck your brains out. And on that, it's 5 o'clock. A walrus, the Wally, can suck your brains out. And Colin, you've been amazing. There are so many things to talk about because there's also Amazon. Amazon, and there's also
audio, big print, and if you really want to read it in German,
how do you say? And what does that actually pronounce as?
Moonscheiss and Ankerdie. We'll leave on a rude one. Moonscheiss and Ankerdie means anchors and seagull shit.
Okay.
Didn't translate.
That's fantastic. Well, and right, thank you so much, everyone, for turning up. Next week, we do have Karen Henthorne, who is an actress in amazing dramas she's done. I'm really looking forward to this week. And she's the loveliest person in the world. Colin, you've been a star. Thank you so much indeed. Let's hope Dave's back as soon as he can. And in the meantime, stick around till afterwards. Just stick around afterwards, Colin, and I'll just say an informal goodbye to you then. Thank you ever so much for everyone for turning up, and we'll see you next week.